Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Level Up Webinar Wednesday session. Thank you for making the time to join us today. I am Audra Mitchell, VP of Group Learning and Development and General Manager of the Massey Learning Institute, and I have the distinct privilege of being your host. Today's session is a collaboration between MLI and the Wellness and Benefits Department as we celebrate and commemorate Men's Mental Health Month. Now, whilst June and November are popular months for supporting men's mental health, it is important that we support the men in our lives all year round. So to this end, our webinar introduces the issue of mental health in the context of the unique cultural, social, and personal challenges men face. The insights and strategies that will be provided are provided with the intention of creating a balanced approach to self-care and well-being. Therefore, I am extremely happy that our audience consists of both men and women, and I encourage you to share the information you get today with your male family members, your colleagues, and your friends. Additionally, a recording of the webinar will also be available on the MLI website and YouTube channel. And as we get into our webinar, you are reminded to participate by posting your questions, adding your comments, so that we can have a truly engaging session. So in other words, we want to hear from you, all right? You'll be hearing from us. We want to hear from you. And it's our aim to answer as many of our questions in the time allotted. So now, without further ado, let me welcome and introduce today's speaker, Dr. Peter Weller, who is more like Massey family than a guest presenter, but he's wearing the hat of guest presenter today, all right? And please allow me to briefly share his bio. So Dr. Peter Weller, the consultant, clinical and community psychologist, is a behavior change consultant and a founder of the Caribbean Male Action Network, CARIMAN. He has more than 30 years of experience providing psychotherapeutic counseling and psychoeducational interventions in support of the healthy development of individuals, especially men, and organizations, so it's individuals, especially men, and organizations across the Caribbean. Dr. Weller focuses on wellness and self-care because personal development is a critical prerequisite for professional development, productive performance, and positive social change. The interventions go beyond the problem to empower the client to have a healthy sense of self by helping them to understand the facts about their situations, to identify their strengths, to understand the origins of some of their unhealthy attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors, and to identify the current factors influencing situations, and therefore make the change to mindsets, so to our mindsets or men's mindsets, to facilitate new life management skills. Dr. Weller, Peter, welcome, and thank you for being with us today and sharing with us on this extremely important and very timely and relevant topic. Over to you.
It's a pleasure to join MLI family and extended network today to talk about a topic that you can share to my heart. As Audra said, I'm a psychologist, so my area is behavior change. I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a medical doctor. It's all about understanding people's behavior, which means it's about understanding their minds and the choices they make. So today we're going to be talking about, in effect, masculinity and manhood, the mindsets that we have, and how these influence how we manage stress and our mental health. I'm going to just share with you an image here. Let's see. There you go. To remind you, for those of you who may not be aware, that Massey has initiated a Pulse initiative in which we're going to be pulling together all the different resources, wellness and benefits, MLI, etc., along with other initiatives like Forces for Good, in a package that will remind us all that our well-being is something we have to address holistically. And one of the very important and valuable tools that is going to be provided to the massive community across the region is the MyPulse platform. And the MyPulse platform is being presented in collaboration with Virgin Pulse, which is now known as Personify. And it's going to allow everybody in the massive community to access resources in support of their well-being. You will just be able to go online, access material, go to links, make healthy habit changes, etc. And this will be rolled out over the next few weeks and months. This is just a little heads up to say that this is coming and that your mental well-being, your mental health, your stress management will be really effectively supported if and when you choose to access these resources on this platform. Because of course, what we want to do is to help people take care of themselves, not to create a dependency on any provider, but to know where you can start to seek help. And then when needed, you can get referrals, find where there are agencies to support you across the region and internationally. So MyPulse is coming, and it's going to be based on the wellness model. And I think this is very important as we talk about mental health and stress management. We often hear the phrase work-life balance, and as Audrey will probably be able to tell you, I am big on promoting the fact that that is not a healthy attitude. Your attitude should be whole life balance. Your entire life, our entire lives need to be in balance. It's not about a dichotomy between your work and then your life, because work is part of your life, and your life is far more important than your work, or it should be. In my view, others may disagree, but I think the point here is we need to be able to be in balance in all the areas of wellness. And you see them displayed there, starting from the right, cognitive, intellectual, our mind works, how effective we are in our thinking, our ability to focus, not procrastinate, etc. Our occupational wellness, our ability to get personal fulfillment from our career while maintaining that balance in life. Emotional, which we're going to be talking about more today, ability to understand ourselves and cope with the challenges. Social, the ability to establish and maintain positive relationships. Physical, we're very familiar with maintaining healthy quality of life in our daily tasks. Spiritual, which for some means religious, that ability to establish peace and harmony in our lives. And then environmental, which has become very important because of our lack of balance in these other areas, I might add, is the ability to understand our responsibility for the quality of the environment around us. So this is what we need to keep in balance, not just work life, but all these areas, which means that we have to have a mindset that kind of has a filing system in which we are able to assess how we're doing in all these different areas of our life. If we're able to do that, then we will have mental health and well-being, because mental health is a prerequisite for all aspects of well-being. So as we move along, I want to also moving. Let's all right. I want to share with you this acronym, CAISO. And as Caribbean people, we're all familiar with CAISO. We could always call it IRI also. I could talk about IRI. CAISO is about how we organize our mindsets around well-being and mental health. It's about having knowledge to make sure that we have knowledge and information. It's about being aware. We talk about mindfulness, aware of how we're feeling, what's bothering us, what's affecting us, because sometimes we brush it off and power through, especially as men. Insight is about being able to connect the dots, to understand the cause and effect, to understand what is connecting with what, and cumulatively how they're affecting us, so our past experiences affect us. And these are very important, because if we're going to manage ourselves, if we're going to manage our mental well-being or mental health, then we can only be effective using the strategies and skills if they're built on a strong foundation of self-awareness, that knowledge, that awareness, that insight. So CAISO is about having knowledge and awareness and insight, and then having the strategies and skills, that is the plans, the approaches, the resources, the competencies to use the opportunities to operationalize the change we want to have. So if we want to promote our mental health, we need to be able to understand what's happening in the moment. If you're having an emotional reaction, a physical reaction, an interpersonal reaction, what's going on? Know what's happening, understand the facts about it. You need to be aware, because the more you're in touch with what is affecting you, the more you can cope with it. And very often, we're so busy, again, as men, powering through, being tough, that we don't even realize things that have influenced us emotionally. It might be something that made us sad, frustrated, angry, guilty, ashamed, whatever it is. If you're not paying attention, if you're not mindful, you will not know. And if you don't know, you can't do anything about it. It's also, as I said, very important that you appreciate why these things affect you. So for emotional and all aspects of well-being, we all have a history. And we all need to understand that experiences in our past affect our perceptions, our perspectives, and the way we respond. The more we can understand what is triggering us, the more we can understand what is driving us, the more we can choose to decide if we're going on that drive or we're bracing. Because once we understand all of that, then we are more effective in using the skills we have. Meaning, do you use a skill of blocking something out of your mind because it's appropriate, or do you use the skill of paying attention? And do you use the skill of progressive relaxation? Do you use the skill of prayer? What is it that you have, that you use, that matches what you're trying to achieve? Sometimes when you're angry, and we'll get to this later, but sometimes when you're angry, it's good to let it off. That's if you understand, you know, you're aware, and you have insight that letting it off is going to be productive. Other times, it's better to note it and file it away. So when that opportunity arises, it's really important to use this Kaiso model. Knowing yourself, having the strategies and skills, and choosing how to respond. And that issue of choice is really important when we talk about creating a mindset of well-being that then promotes mental health and mental wellness. So it's about how you look at things. And if you take a quick look at these two images, I would love it if you would put in the chat what you're seeing there. The image on the left, what is it of? And the one on the right, what are you seeing? So I would love you to just make some notes in the chat, and we'll talk about it a little later. What do you see in the image on the left? What is that a picture of? And the image on the right, what's that a picture of? Is it a dog, a cat, a house, a beach, a roti, a doubles? What are you seeing? Not seeing much in the chat yet. Hoping that folks will add some comments as we go along. This is really just emphasizing to us it's all about how we look at things. If we look at life in a very narrow way, we will only have a narrow set of skills and responses to give. If we understand that as individuals, our selfhood is broad, there are all of these dimensions of well-being. And if we understand the process of how our mind works, then we are going to be more effective. But if we're only seeing one thing every time, if we're being very automatic in our reactions and responses, then we're not going to understand what's going on, and we're not going to cope properly. Now, any presentation on mental health and well-being really should give a lot of detail on some of the challenges we face, and folks are very familiar with a lot of these diagnoses. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I don't think that's for another workshop or a webinar or something. But just to say that there are a number of mental health disorders that commonly affect men. We know about the mood disorders. So those are the disorders such as depression, the anxiety disorders, which can include everything from social anxiety to the more psychotic kinds of disorders, which are like schizophrenia, paranoia. And then we have the post-traumatic stress disorders. Those are the disorders in which people have flashbacks, etc., etc. And then you have mental illnesses that are associated with substance use. So And of course, we have other ones. This is not comprehensive. We have attention deficit disorder, et cetera, that are being diagnosed more frequently. One of the reasons why I wanted to highlight these particular disorders is that our mindset needs to be very clear. These are extreme behavior patterns that are predated by more normal behaviors and situations. What do I mean by that? The disorder that's a mood disorder is an extreme version of what is normal emotion, of sadness, depression, etc. These are the clinical disorders. So you can decide you can be feeling down, not feeling good about your life or what's happening today. That's very different from being so down that you can't get up to go to work, that you're not eating properly or you're eating too much. Those are the all these kinds of disorders that we hear about. You have the anxiety disorders, which, at the normal range, yes, we all get a little nervous, a little anxious, a little stressed. But if it begins to interfere with your life, if it begins to prevent you from doing things, if you don't want to go out because you don't want to be around people because you're going to feel too tense, etc., then that is an anxiety disorder and will require particular intervention. Psychotic disorders, again, schizophrenia, etc., in which people are not processing information and are not in touch with reality. Well, we all have fantasies, we all have dreams, we all kind of daydream. When you're daydreaming and seeing something that's not there, you're not psychotic. But somebody who is believing that what they're seeing is real and not able to relate to what is real, they're out of touch with reality. So I'm trying to show that these things all exist on a continuum. And we need to understand it for ourselves so we know when we are going maybe a little into the dysfunctional realm, but we also need to understand it for the people around us. Particularly significant are the post-traumatic stress responses and disorders. So yes, you have a bad experience or something very horrible happens in your community or somebody in your family, and you're upset and you're worried and you're anxious, and when you go out at night, you feel a little nervous and being extra careful with the windows in the car. That's normal. It's after trauma, so it's post-traumatic, but it's a stress response. The disorder is when it reaches a stage of, again, you don't want to go anywhere, or you're suspicious of everybody, or you are worried about your children every time they go out and you can't sleep, etc., because of something that has happened. That is a different dimension of that continuum and requires a different response. I'm mentioning this because we have to take care of ourselves at each of those stages, but it's important to understand them, to understand what you need, and to understand when that need becomes significant, both for yourself and others. Substance abuse is one that is, of course, very significant in our Caribbean societies, and a lot of men self-medicate. They take liquor, ganja, marijuana, whatever substance, because they're using it as a coping strategy for their emotions, for their wellness issues. And unfortunately, that in and of itself is a problem, but then the chemicals in the drugs can now affect your brain and lead to other mental illnesses. And I'm sure we all know people who are not able to handle the ganja and the marijuana, and they have a psychotic breaks, they go paranoid, etc. Other people, not a problem. They're able to function. So again, it's a continuum, and these things all vary among ourselves. One point I want to flag here, and I'll get back to it, is genetics. So nature is about our environment, our social system, and how those things might affect us. So a bad experience can make you anxious, or it can make you depressed. It can make you confused and distracted, but it doesn't necessarily give you a mood disorder, an anxiety disorder, or a psychotic disorder. However, the same bad experience that I have may affect me differently because of my genetic, that's my nature, dimension. And so the other thing we need to be aware of is our family histories. Now, we know about family histories and we talk about them a lot when we're talking about um, diabetes, sugar, hypertension, etc., etc. But we don't often talk about family histories when you think about auntie who was a little strange and never used to do this, or uncle who did that. And unfortunately, our family members who had these dysfunctions in the times gone by, didn't get the support they needed because of the stigma of mental health. But we've moved a bit beyond that now. And I think it's really important that for our own self-care and well-being, we understand our family history of mentality. And I'm saying mentality rather than mental illness, because you may have a relative, a grandmother or grandfather who tended to be a little anxious and worried or a little distrusting of people. Well, maybe it was in the normal range. But maybe that anxiety then began to prevent them doing things. So their distrust bordered on paranoia, and moved them in the direction of a psychotic disorder. Unfortunately, in the same way, we don't like to think about hypertension because we want to eat all the sweet things, and diabetes because we want to eat all the things that we like. We also don't want to think about family members who might have had these dysfunctions, but we need to, and we need to understand that it's part of life. So nature, nurture, social environment factors, family, genetic factors are all really important for us to understand if we're going to manage our mental health, manage our emotional well-being, and also our broader wellness. Moving along, and this is just a very quick slide that I put together because yes, men do have different mental health issues, partly because of their physiology. So your women will have their concerns. Hormonal differences, for example, mean that men have higher levels of testosterone, which can affect mood and behavior, sometimes related to higher levels of aggression, etc. Our brain structure as men, we have a larger amygdala, which means we process emotions. Surprisingly, people might think. But we have a smaller prefrontal cortex. Some of us, now this is a generalization, but I'm just sharing these things for you to think about. That smaller prefrontal cortex can, for example, mean that we don't do as well with decision making and regulating our responses. That means that although we are feeling, we're not handling the feeling perhaps as well as we should. Obviously, society also has expectations of us, and we're socialized, for example, and we talk about it a lot, to suppress those emotions, to not express what we're feeling, except certain emotions. I'm sure you all can guess which emotions men are allowed to feel, allowed to express, and then criticize when they do it. Anger, aggression, all are socially acceptable from a gender perspective, unfortunately, but can be very harmful and damaging to the individual and to those around them. The other social expectation that challenges us is the fact that we're supposed to be strong, so we're not supposed to seek help. And when you add to that the stigma of mental health, bad enough we mustn't seek help when we're having stomach aches and pains. But if we're having depression or uncertainty or feeling like we're losing it, we're told we must man up, tough up. And that is a big barrier to our mental health and well-being. Work-related pressures are unique also. You know, men have different kinds of jobs. Now, all of this is not saying women don't have similar issues and there's not an overlap. But today we're focusing on men. So, you know, whether it is because men tend to have work that may be more physical, and because it's more physical, it's more stress on the body, and because it's more stress on the body, it can lead to emotional stress, mental health issues, perhaps. Again, we talk about the substance abuse that men engage in, and, you know, there's use, normal range, not affecting your functioning, nobody's having a problem with, and then along the continuum to the abuse where it is disrupted. And finally, of course, we all experience trauma, but men are more likely to experience certain types of trauma. And because they're not allowed to discuss it, they don't focus on their feelings, they don't unpack, they don't know, they're not aware, they don't have the insight, then they aren't able to use the strategies and skills to take care of themselves the way they should. So it's really a setup. But at least, thank God, at last, we have attention being placed on how we as men function and what the needs are. And we have organizations like Massey in this context, putting together the My Pulse initiative, the platform, and doing outreach, particularly targeting men. And there's a lot more that we can do, and hopefully it will be part of the whole initiative going throughout this year and beyond. Other entities as well. So the government agencies are doing more work with men, the UN, the church. People are aware that there's a need. It is for us to be more strategic about how we provide the resources and ensure that they actually meet the needs of men. But at the same time, as we push that to them, we have to pull men into the space of self-awareness and skill development. That's socialization. Now, that was all the word stuff. I'm going to try to use some images now to dig a little deeper. Because society tells us, and this is true across the world, that men are supposed to be powerful. There's a hierarchy. It's called patriarchy by some, and that pushes buttons for others who think that it's demeaning men. But the truth is, men are expected to be powerful. They're expected to procreate. You must have children. If you're a real man, you're supposed to be a protector, which means that you must be tough and strong and be the one who goes out when a sound is heard in the night. You're supposed to be the provider, which means you have to have an income. You have to be having enough to provide for whoever is dependent on you. You're the problem solver very often, especially the problem is one that comes under the protector and provider area. And you're also not supposed to be afraid of taking risks. You're supposed to be tough and brave and be able to go out and do things. But I show this slide because I think it's important to highlight how society is changing. And so we have this gentleman on the bicycle carrying his son, who looks like he's had a rough day at primary school or preschool, and talking on the phone. And at first glance, some people say, "Oh, isn't that wonderful? He's an engaged father." Other people might look at it and say, "But why is he carrying that child in a dangerous way on his head, on his shoulder? Why is he talking on the phone?" Others will say, "Well, but at least he stopped and he's not biking and talking and carrying at the same time." We men face a lot of challenges in these changing times. One of the ones I think as a therapist I've become very aware of is that nobody's telling us how to juggle these roles. Society wants men to be engaged and caregivers, etc., etc. But you still must do all these other things. And we feel we should do it. And we exert a lot of negative peer pressure on our peers about what it means to be a real man. And I won't even get into the issue of sexuality because the issue of sexual orientation, etc., is also a whole another dynamic that complicates this whole idea of who is a man, what is a man, how a man should behave. And unfortunately, because of a lot of homophobia in the Caribbean, any behavior by a man that is seen to be too soft, that is taking care of himself, expressing his feelings, etc., may sometimes be seen as unmanly. And as we go down that continuum, of course, unmanly leads to homosexual, etc., etc., and then you get the stigma and the backlash. So you don't get people engaging in the behaviors they should for fear of being stigmatized. And this is something that we really have to address. But things are changing, even if it's superficial. I mean, the good changes are this man on the bicycle taking care of his son. The other lighter changes are that men now feel they can wear whatever they want to wear and whatever jewelry, etc., etc. People may see that as not a good sign, but in a way it shows that men are more expressive and willing to accept each other. And we need to carry that wave forward in terms of mental health and self-care. Because that son and father relationship is very important. And many of us as men have issues that affect us emotionally in other ways because of things that have been missing in our lives, things that we want to share and are not able to share. So whether we had an absent father or a conflicted relation with our father, or we as men have children who we're not able to relate to, the court systems are not always on our side when it comes to visitation, etc., etc., or the relationships themselves may be strained. But again, something very important that we need to consider as we talk about mental health and well-being. And these attitudes about boys will be boys and boys don't cry and act like a man. We really have to be more intentional, because if we're going to promote mental health, then boys must be learning to be respectful and responsible for their actions. They must be accountable. They must see that as being manly. They must learn that it's okay to cry, to express feelings. They must choose when they do that. But if they're feeling a feeling, they need to name it and express it. And that acting like a man is really a subset of acting like a human. We all need to be kind. We need to be gentle with ourselves. We need to be gentle with people around us. These are messages that we need to promote. These are messages that we as men need to not only understand, but we need to share with those around us. And forget about the ones who are going to say you're making boys soft and you're making them gay, etc. You're making them healthy and they're going to make their choices. And if you're teaching them the relevant values, etc., then they'll make the choices that are aligned with your value system. Or they'll rebel. But if you set a stage where they can talk to you, and I'm getting into the fathering thing now, then even when they rebel, you'll be surprised that they will come back if that early stage was set for a healthy relationship. So a lot of us are working with mindsets that are strongly influenced by early experiences. We don't realize it. And so when we talk about that Kaiser model, if we know that it is likely that there are things from our childhood that affect us, and if we're aware that we have emotional reactions and certain attitudes that are not aligned with where we want to get to, and we have insight into what may have happened to us in our earlier years that maybe we pushed aside, or it happens to so many people that we don't realize it's important, then if we're able to move beyond those, yeah, we are more likely to use the skills and strategies that can work. Many of us have had one or more of these adverse childhood experiences, and the research now is showing how much these cause lifelong medical, mental, and social suffering. The obvious ones are the physical abuse and the parental substance abuse and the sexual abuse and the domestic violence. But the emotional abuse is something that many of us don't understand the impact of. And the social context of all the crime and violence that's going on now, the domestic violence, is having a serious impact on all of us in one way or another, whether we're growing up as a child in it, or we have children who are growing up in it, or we are married to people who have grown up in it. These adverse childhood experiences are something that it's not that you need to have them front of mind all the time, folks, but you need to understand that they are probably relevant in your life, and you need to understand that relevance. Because when you understand that relevance, that Kaiso process, you are more in control. When you don't, and it's in the back of your mind, that's when it bubbles up and bursts out, and you end up doing unhealthy things and feeling unhealthy feelings because you don't understand what's triggering you. Automatic cars are easier to drive, but you sacrifice control. You only have the brake and the accelerator. A standard, you're able to change gears. You're able to go into neutral and choose which gear you want to go into. And I think this is one of the things that's so important to understand, that we have a choice. Yes, we need to automatically respond to certain things, react. You need to react and do what is automatic. You've learned it and it's good. But if it's not good, then you need to unlearn it. We need to think of it as, okay, I need to change gears. I'm feeling a feeling and I know and I have insight that this can lead me in the wrong direction. Too quickly, let me change gears. Let me take that pause in neutral and then make a choice. And if it's one of the main messages I would love us to take away, especially as men, is that this tough, do it, get it done, automatic, I know how to run things attitude is making us unhealthy. We need to say it's okay to pause and think, to make choices, to make changes, and you have to create a space for that. That's that neutral that you go into when you have a standard shift car and you press the clutch and you go into neutral and you decide, are you going up into a higher gear, down to a lower gear? Are you going to press the brake and reverse? It's okay to make choices. It's not a sign of weakness. A lot of the stress that we feel is because we go after everything we feel without fully examining it and then have to deal with the consequences after. So the Johari window reminds us that if you understand yourself, the better you understand yourself, the better you can manage your emotions, the more healthy you will be mentally. So if you look at the Johari window, some of you will be familiar with it, but it reminds us that, yes, there are things in the public arena, there are things that I know about myself and other people know. People know I like music, they know I like my garden, they know I like to travel. No secrets there, full arena. Below that are the things that are known to me but not known to others. So they see me on a facade, but they don't know I'm doing this presentation. They don't know how nervous I was. I've done this for 30 years and I still get anxious and nervous. Looks like I'm confident, I hope. Looks like I know what I'm talking about, I hope. But inside, I wonder. Then you have the things that are not known to yourself, but known to others. And we all are surprised when we get feedback that people about how people see us. They can tell certain things about us, how we react in certain situations to certain people, etc., or automatic responses. And it's one of the reasons why it is so important to have a peer support group. And we as men need to have positive peer support groups. We need to have other men around us. No, I'm not even talking about other relationships with women. I'm talking about men. We need to have around us people who know us and then we know each other. We have people who we still keep things from privately because you can't share everything. But we also need those people in the top right-hand corner, people who listen to us and we will listen to them, who can tell us the things we don't know about ourselves. Peter, you realize how critical you are. Peter, you're too irritated. Peter, you too superficial, whatever it is. And you will listen to them and move that awareness out of the blind spot into the arena. Because we all have things in that bottom right-hand corner. We all have things we don't know. We don't know about ourselves, and others don't know about us. Can't help it. That's life will reveal that as we go along. But certainly as it goes now, the more we can share with our peers, the more we'll understand ourselves. The more we understand ourselves and move things into the arena, the more our mental health will be in balance in all these areas of well-being. And therefore, we'll feel more comfortable moving from behind the facade to share more things with other people as well. Because we're trying to reprogram our brain. So this whole issue of mental health and well-being is about mind management. And many of us don't realize we're not conscious of the fact, although if asked, we will say, yes, if you do something often enough, it will become a habit. But that process of habit formation is about neuroplasticity, is about how your brain functions. Don't have time to go into that in detail here, but the reality is that, again, if we understand what we are trying to do, then we need to practice it. That O in Kaiso is about opportunities to operationalize. You have to do things over and over again for it to become a habit, for it to become a new automatic. That can only happen if you're choosing something that's working for you and you're making it work. And I think that reprogramming your brain is a critical thing for us to understand, that you can't just try something once or twice and it didn't work, so you stop. It takes practice to make a habit, to make a new program, to make it automatic. Because every crisis is a danger and opportunity. It's almost a cliche now, but the truth is that it's an opportunity to make a new choice. The choice you make is going to be more effective with regard to your mental health and your well-being if you're making it with that knowledge and awareness and insight. It's only when a mosquito lands on your testicles that you realize that there's always a way to solve problems without using violence. You get me? As men, you will really understand. As women, you probably can guess. We have to understand what we're doing, not use what we do automatically in all contexts and think it's going to solve all problems, because it causes harm. This is not about violence towards other people now. This is about self-care and having horses for courses, having the strategies and skills that are going to solve more problems. And we as men have some unique problems that we need to deal with in new ways. We need to change our programming from one in which we see health-seeking behavior and help-seeking behavior as weakness and lacking manhood. And we want to change it to the more positive help-seeking is equal to future strength. And so health-seeking is good for healthy manhood and masculinity. That whole idea of you have to tough it out needs to change to you have to be wise. Breaking the cycle, allowing new circuits to program, closing the tabs that are no longer useful, and making space for change. And I really do want to highlight the fact that when we talk about Kaiso, it's about making space for change. It's that pause that allows us to do something different. That was a misplaced slide. So we all go through problems. When we have trauma in our life, our brain automatically tells us whether we should fight, whether we should flee, that's flight, whether we should freeze, or whether we should fawn, we should pause and make a choice. We each need to know what our response is to any stress or trauma and be able to manage it. It may be appropriate to fight, it may be appropriate to flee, it may be appropriate to freeze or to try to make everybody good by fawning, everybody feel good. But it's about making conscious choices because the brain is designed for survival. It perceives things and immediately files them away and triggers automatic reactions. All those automatic reactions are not necessarily best for all of us at all times. So we need to understand what is going on. We need to become comfortable with discomfort. In this graphic, it talks about befriending your discomfort. And again, this attitude we have as men of not wanting to feel bad or express how we're feeling means that we don't know what is going on. So this is reminding us that we need to notice discomfort in our body and mind. Curiously ask, okay, what are the emotions calling our attention to? Make time to think about them. You don't have to do it right away. You might say, okay, I know this is something is happening here. Let me think about it when I'm driving home from work or I'm waiting on transport or when I'm walking around the savannah. But acknowledge the feelings, name them to tame them. Don't be uncomfortable with discomfort. Discomfort is part of change. When you go to the gym, when you're playing ball and your muscles start hurting you, you don't stop playing football, or you don't stop going to the gym unless you have done it the wrong way. When you do it the right way, that little muscle heat and pain is a reminder that the muscle is strengthening. That tiredness you're feeling after a sweat, you had a good workout. We need to be able to be comfortable with discomfort and appreciate the lessons that we learn from them about our emotional well-being. Because emotions aren't good or bad. They are signals to us. We're told so often that, anger is bad and depression is bad. No, anger means something is happening that I need to be aware of. Our body's bringing our attention to something. Sadness is to say something is wrong. Stress means I'm being pushed too far. Know our emotions, name them to tame them. You can't practice skills and strategies when the opportunity arises if you're not knowledgeable, aware, and having insight. So again, healing can feel uncomfortable. So I'm saying to you, look back at your life and think about what has gone on and things that may have caused you hurt and pain and how they're affecting you now, and then find strategies to cope with them. But that process can be messy, it can be joyous, it can be confusing, it can be scary, it can be lonely, it can be boring. It's uncomfortable. Change is uncomfortable. But in the same way that we accept some kinds of discomfort, we need to be willing to accept these. They don't have to be center stage. You don't have to be always digging deep and picking away at a cut and so on. But you know what's going on. You have a filing system for it. You're learning and evolving as you go along. That is a strength. That is something to be pursued. Talking. Always important to talk things out. Having somebody in your life you can talk to. And nowadays, the technology provides hotlines, helplines, resources. Because what many people don't understand is that talking is powerful, both because if you have somebody who's empathic, you feel heard. If you have somebody who has knowledge, you might gain information you need. But talking is also a way of clearing your head of what you're thinking about and realizing maybe some things don't make sense, some things really are important, etc. Once you talk it out, you unravel the knots of thinking that are going on when you keep things in your mind. So talking it out is important, expressing yourself is important, choosing resources, accessing resources that can help, critical to being clear on what's going on in your head so that you can make the right choices. Another thing that I think, and I'm just highlighting some issues now, and then I'm going to wrap up for our discussion, but financial problems. I wanted to touch on this because it comes up all the time in the work we do with Massey. I'm one of the EAP providers, and I work with Wellness and Benefits on some of the projects as well, particularly this MyPulse project. And we do a lot of work on finances and we teach people budgeting and saving and accounting, etc. But I was saying to Audra, I think the other day, we don't spend enough time to talk about what is the emotional side of saving. Why is saving such a challenge? Well, it's a challenge for many of us because it requires us to prioritize and defer our gratification and rewards. You're putting away rather than putting in now. And in order to do that prioritization, we have to manage our expectations. We have to change our thinking. We have to know the difference between, oh, one day I want to do all of this, I want to do this, and move in the direction of, okay, if I save, I may be able to do this. Maybe I have to give up on that fantasy and dream and be more realistic. But if I only think about the fantasy and dream, then that little bit I'm saving doesn't seem to make sense compared to the joy I'm going to feel by spending it going to a fete or buying a new sneakers. So we need to understand those dynamics going on in people's minds. And then we have conflicting needs. So we want to go out with our friends and socialize and get that good vibe because it's good for our well-being. But the money we're spending there could be put away because we want to save towards buying a house or paying our children's school fees in the next school year. We have to think through those priorities, and it's stressful and it's an emotional component. But if you don't do it, you probably won't change the behavior. And our circumstances change, and what we had wanted in the past may have changed to what we want now, or what we can actually get. Along with the fact that many of us are in relationships with a partner or a family who have other priorities. So we say we're going to save, but now they're doing something that doesn't align with that goal. And you're saying, why are you doing that? And they're saying, well, you did this other thing. We have to talk it out. We have to express. We have to have that knowledge and awareness and insight to create those strategies and skills. And don't end up soothing ourselves by spending the money and using the resources unwisely. So many practical mind management techniques, which I'm hoping we're going to talk about a bit in the question and answer. So we all know about meditation. That's that calming. That's that detaching from the stressors. What I want to highlight is positive self-talk. Positive self-talk is that affirmation that you do that counters the negativity. Now, many of us use affirmations, but they're not as effective because we're just saying, I'm good, I'm God's child, I can do it. Well, really? Yes, maybe. But that's not what's getting in the way of you doing it. What is getting in the way of you doing it is that there's a part of your mind that's saying, yes, you think you're God's child, but you weren't the favorite of your mother. Or, yes, you think you're good enough, but that teacher told you that you would never be good because you can't do math. Or, yes, you're going to try your best, but every time you tried to be part of a social group, everybody excluded you. So if you're going to use affirmations and positive self-talk to reframe your mind, again, neuroplasticity, putting in new programming, dealing with those emotions of anger, of sadness, rejection, then your positive self-talk must not just be a superficial mantra that does not address your reality. It needs to go straight to that knowledge you have and awareness you have and insight about your mind. It will be far more effective in that context. Having a daily journal, beginning to actually, in your mind, organize your self-care for each of the levels of wellness. What is it that you're trying to do? What is happening when you try it? What are you going to try next? If you make that part of your life in the same way that many of us have prayers as part of our life, or a gratitude journal, or exercise program as part of our life, if this is just a way you're saying each day, you're thinking, okay, how am I feeling? How balanced I am? What is really joking me in the side right now? Is it that relationship issue? Is it that I'm feeling bored, I'm not being cognitively stimulated? Is it that I haven't been to church or I've been praying regularly? If you begin thinking like that, instead of feeling guilty and bad and beating up yourself, say, okay, here, now I know what I need to do because I have that knowledge, I have that awareness and that insight. I know where I need to go with this. And maybe we can even make it a daily pattern in which we choose a day in which maybe we're more mindful on a Monday, looking at our cognitive development, doing puzzles, driving a new route. And people say even just using a different hand to clean your teeth stimulates your brain in a whole different way. Togetherness Tuesday, relationships. Maybe that's the day you choose to lime or to call an old friend. Workout Wednesday, teamwork Thursday at work, doing things. Financial Friday, sentimental Saturday, dealing with your emotions. Spiritual Sunday. It's important to have a plan for self-care, especially when it comes to our emotional well-being, but keeping in mind that it's part of a holistic wellness package that we all have. And we need to use the resources that are around. Most countries have hotlines now, various types of telephone services. Some have them specifically for men, which is very good. Trinidad is unique because it has a website, Find Care TT, that lists all the free mental health and psychosocial services in Trinidad. Um, you can go online there and you can find telehealth counseling services. You can get videos that teach you about various things, child development, suicide prevention. It's a one-stop shop and it's very important. Similar services are available in other countries, but not as coordinated as this. Avail yourself of these things. And if not for you, then for your peers, other men or others around you who might need this help. And I'm going to close there for now. I will go back uh, as needed, but I wanted to set the stage. There's so much that we can talk about on this topic, but I'm going to turn back over to Audra now. I know I've gone a bit long, but I hope we do still have some time for question and answer and maybe looking at where next we should go. Over to you,
Thank
Audra.
Thank you, Dr. Weller. I was just saying to myself that we certainly need to bring you back for a follow-up session.
Happy to
So
come back.
much, and we'll be happy to have you. You really shared a lot of powerful nuggets and insights. And I was thinking to myself that whilst this webinar is targeted to men, all of us, men and women, have certainly benefited from what you've shared. The importance of making space for change. I was making some notes, the importance of making space for change, the power in talking, accessing resources that can help, and really being clear about what's happening to us, and I know there's so much more. So what we'll do now is I will hand you over and I'll welcome Renee, who will briefly moderate our Q&A session, but I definitely guarantee to your audience that we will have a follow-up session and more workshops around this. So Renee, over to you.
Thank you so much, Audra. Good morning, everybody. Thanks to you too, Dr. Weller. All right, our first question this morning. What are the most common mental health issues that affect men?
Okay, well, I think I touched on that at the very beginning when I talked about the fact that the moods. So the mental health issues include depression, which very often men don't recognize. They will know that they're feeling a little down, but they don't understand the extent of it and they don't understand the symptoms. Anxiety, of course, we all feel stress and anxiety. But again, many of us don't understand our stress response cycle. So, for me, when I'm beginning to get tense, it's my neck. If my neck starts feeling tight, I know there's something bothering me. But before my neck got tight, I probably was feeling a little something in my stomach. And before that, I was probably feeling a little distracted. So again, if we understand our stress response, we can work back to identify what we're responding to. If I were to feel the tension in my neck now, I might think that I'm tense because of what Audra just said, that I'm going to have to do more workshops and I don't want to do them and it's stressing me out. But of course, that's not it because I enjoy this work. My tension was probably because I had a lot of things going this morning prior to this and I was feeling rushed. And why did I have a lot of things going? And I go back and I can realize what's stressing me out. So a lot of men are feeling stress and tension and they soothe themselves rather than solving the problem. And I want to use those two terms because it's important to be able to soothe, but it's also important to solve. And sometimes if you soothe too early, again, that's that discomfort. Then you don't really understand what's bothering you and you can't really solve. So there are the mood issues, the anxiety issues, relationship issues, again, because of the box that men have been put in about how they must be and what is expected of them, and the changing dynamics. So there's a lot of stuff that we need to look at in terms of intimacy, communication, expectations, and then, of course, conflict, aggression, domestic violence. So those are issues for men too. I think that's kind of the general area in which I find most of the men have issues. Of course, then it applies in the workplace, or it might apply in their relationships or in their social network. So that's a low-level response. We'll have to get back to that in one of the other sessions.
No problem at all. No problem. Thank you so much. All right. What, and I know you covered this as well, but what are some effective coping strategies for men dealing with mental health issues? You mentioned a few just now, the anxiety, the depression. Go ahead.
Again, it begins with awareness. The coping strategy must begin with an understanding of what you're experiencing, what you're feeling, and then that's also about the knowledge and awareness and insight, and then choosing a strategy or a skill. Now, the strategy or skill may be a solving strategy, or it might be a soothing strategy, or it might be a combination. And as I mentioned earlier, self-talk is a very important one. If you understand what is going on in your mind, if you were to break that cycle, then you need to understand where it's coming from. So that's the solving part. But you need to also have a strategy maybe to soothe by breaking the cycle, because maybe in that moment you don't have time to go back and say, oh, what's going on here? Why am I feeling this way? You may have to manage that feeling. And so those are the soothing, which have to do with the kind of mindful activities, which may be a meditation or a prayer or an affirmation. It may be a physical activity. It may be the avoiding or moving away from the problem that is affecting you right then, and giving yourself some space to manage. So there are many different strategies, and I think we each have to have our own toolkit of what works for us. What might work for me may not work for Audra, or it might work for Audra on a Wednesday and me on a Friday. We need to know ourselves and know how to cope. So we have the self-care toolkits that we need to develop that will include the self-talk we use. It will include the physical activities that we can do, the muscle relaxation, the deep breathing, because these things break that cycle. You know, it's unfortunate that people don't understand how well these things work because they're looking for an immediate fix, but they really reprogram your brain. And the more we are able to understand how important breathing is, and settling our breathing and relaxing the muscles that have been tense because of the emotion we're feeling, the more our mind is free to be creative in responding as a solution or to soothe. Again, a lot more we could say about that in another space.
Great, no problem at all. I appreciate that. Well, we are out of time, so I'm just going to hand back over to Audra. I know she mentioned you'll be back again so that we can further engage in the Q&A. But over to you, Audra.
Thank you, Rennie, and thank you again, Dr. Weller. So time flies when we're having fun, and unfortunately, we've come to the end of our webinar. So on behalf of all of us at MLI, the Wellness and Benefits team, our IT production team, and of course, Dr. Weller, we want to thank you for your attention, for listening, and hope that you know that it has indeed been extremely helpful, as we said, not just for you, but we really want to encourage you to share with the men in your life, your colleagues, family members, friends, and we certainly will have a follow-up session. And again, to our men, again, another note, we want to remind you that male mental health is about self-awareness, making informed choices, mind management, and being intentional with the daily practices of mental self-care. And Dr. Wells has really shared with us a lot of information around that. So really being intentional as we all continue to navigate what is indeed a very challenging time that is also full of opportunities. So we want you to be well equipped as we navigate this space. So we want to encourage you, please continue to look out for our MLI programs, visit our website where you can see our programs and offerings. And everybody, we want to wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Until next time, always remember to level up. Bye for now. Take care.